Good morning, Burnaby. This is Chris Crew reporting live from BCIT Burnaby Campus with your fresh 9 a.m. news of the day. According to TransLink BC, there are no bus and C-bus services due to the ongoing job action at CNBC by QP 4500. However, the SkyTrain that goes through the Expo, Canada Line, and Millennium Line is not impacted. TransLink adds that none of the routes operated by CNBC will be operational. And the reason for the strike, stated by QP Representative Liam O'Neill, is that workers previously worked more than overtime but weren't compensated enough accordingly. However, the biggest reason is extreme work overload issues, according to O'Neill. The strike action is set to last for 48 hours, which means it is scheduled to end this early Wednesday. And the cost of Uber rides is at all-time high as transit buses are inactive at the moment. People who tried to get an Uber this morning were met with the message saying fares are a lot higher due to the increased demand. A spokesperson for Uber said drivers are being offered extra incentives to complete more rides during these times, and also added that surging pricing occurs when there are more ride requests than there are drivers. TransLink is recommending people to either use carpool, cycle, or walk during these difficult times. The federal government is temporarily cutting back the number of new visa it issues for international students. The move comes as schools across Canada turn more heavily to foreign students and their hefty tuition fees to help balance their budgets, but not always with enough places for the students to live. Housing Minister Sean Fraser says a temporary cap could have a bigger impact on communities like Peel Region in the Greater Toronto Area, where the influx of foreign students has strained housing resources.
We do see that there's certain pockets of the country that have seen significant increase in population growth as a result of institutions taking on more students than they could handle. I anticipate, as you see in some of those communities, fewer students that may come to Canada. As a result, you may see some pressure alleviated.
Ottawa will issue new visas to just over 360,000 international students this year, compared with nearly 560,000 issued in 2023. Currently, Canada is going through an unprecedented growth of population, with over 1 million people coming last year in 2022, with mostly non-permanent residents such as students and temporary workers. And this comes with a cost. According to Dr. Kathleen Ross, the country isn't producing nearly enough homegrown primary care doctors to keep up with the country's health needs. She added that there are not enough physicians working and training, and that they need to train more to meet the demand, as well as with the number of people retiring. Our Care Initiative data showed approximately 4.5 million people were without a family doctor in 2019. However, that number spiked to 6.5 million in 2023. And these results brought the devastating consequences to the emergency rooms, with an increase of about 1 million people coming to the emergency room unscheduled from 2022 and throughout the 2023. Family members of hostages held by Hamas stormed a committee meeting in Israel's parliament, demanding a deal to win their loved ones' release. Jordana Miller from ABC News reports.
Several families of Israeli hostages storming a committee meeting at Parliament, yelling at lawmakers to bring home their loved ones from Gaza. Angry relatives calling for an end to the right-wing government they say is preventing a hostage deal to free over 100 Israelis. It's another sign of the growing criticism and pressure mounting on Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, whose actions indicate dismantling Hamas comes before freeing the hostages. Jordana Miller, ABC News, Jerusalem.
Today's high will be 7 degrees and the low will be 6 degrees, and there will be light rain throughout the day. And in fact, there will be light rain throughout next week, Wednesday, as of now stated by the Environment of Canada. And this may be a good time to buy a new umbrella of your favorite color. Thank you for listening, BCIT. I'll see you back here again in about 2 hours. Stay tuned.
This is 1680 The Crow, and you're listening to our feature presentation.
I'm Nick Nicholas Hauka, and this is the Fall Off Podcast. In this podcast, we discuss players, teams, and coaches who seemingly had a very bright future ahead of them, but against all odds, never lived up to the hype. We discuss how they became household names, excelled at one point of their careers, and then the inevitable fall off. Over the next 3 weeks, I will be talking about arguably one of the greatest college quarterbacks and Oregon Ducks players of all time, Heisman-winning quarterback Marcus Mariota, who led the Ducks to a national championship game and was taken second overall by the Tennessee Titans in the 2015 NFL Draft. But shortly after, the fall-off began. It's 2015 in Chicago, Illinois. Day one of the NFL Draft is about to start. In the green room is Jameis Winston. Winston has always been highly touted, being a 4-star prospect coming out of high school, and after a prominent career at Florida State, is hoping to be selected number 1. Sitting next to him is Marcus Mariota. Mariota was almost an afterthought of the same recruiting class coming out of high school, only having 4 FBS offers. Despite that, Mariota is right next to Winston, and after what he accomplished in his last 3 seasons with Oregon, has just as much of a chance to go number 1. Who will go first? Who will go second? And how did Mariota defy the odds to get here? Rewind to late 2011 in Eugene, Oregon. The Oregon Ducks football program is riding as high as it ever has been. Under head coach Chip Kelly, Oregon is having its greatest run in program history. Finishing the previous season 12-2 and without a devastating loss to rival USC late in the year, would have been right back in the national championship game, just like the previous season.
Maldonado on the way, pulled it left, no good. USC upsets Oregon.
Hoping to continue their newfound dominance in the 2012 season, seemingly out of nowhere, Darren Thomas, starting quarterback for the Ducks, declares for the 2012 draft. Ducks and college football fans are shocked, as despite having 2 wonderful seasons for the team, he wasn't seen as pro-ready. What Ducks fans were unaware of was how much pressure Mariota was putting on Thomas during practice. Farhan Lalji from TSN, who covered that Rose Bowl game, had some insight on what was occurring during that time.
But when they got into bowl prep that year, he was making a real name for himself. And just during that bowl prep period, while Thomas was still the quarterback, you knew that there was going to be a battle the following year for sure. And, I'm sure that if the portal was available like it is now, Thomas wouldn't have declared. He probably would have just gone elsewhere.
For most fans not privy to this information, the mystery behind that baffling draft declaration would be solved the second the college football season would start. With Thomas moving on, Brian Bennett seems to be the shoe-in starter going forward. During the season, Bennett backed up Thomas and exceeded expectations whenever he filled in due to injury or late in games during a blowout victory. However, a little-known 2-star QB recruit out of St. Louis High School in Hawaii was about to make a big impression. Marcus Mariota looks to steal the starting job from Bennett in his second season as a redshirt freshman with the Ducks. After impressing coaches and players alike during training camp, on August 24, 2012, the Oregon Ducks announced that Mariota had officially won the starting position, beating out Bennett. It's September 1st, 2012. Oregon is playing Arkansas State in their season opener.
Marcus now to the end zone. Great throw. I mean, this is just getting silly.
Marcus Mariota throws 18 completions on 22 attempts and 300 yards, impressing the Ducks coaching staff and fans alike with his poise, accuracy, and decision-making. Gord Randall, TSN scout, with more.
Wow, yeah. I remember watching some of those early starts from Mariota, and one of the things that stood out was his movement skills at his size. Like he was already 6'3" and change. Chip Kelly already had a reputation for having a pretty quarterback-friendly offensive system. So they were running a bunch of that spread option stuff. Mariota was clearly immediately a weapon with his legs.
Mariota went on to not throw an interception until week 3 and led the Ducks to a 12-1 record. Mariota finished the 2012 season with a completion percentage of 68.5%, 2,677 yards throwing, 752 rushing yards on the ground, and 32 touchdowns to only 6 interceptions.
And then that freshman year blows the doors off of everybody, and the sky appears to be the limit. And so, Oregon was a trendy pick for the national championship that year, and from the outset, that was the bar that was set for that Ducks team.
Following his first year as a starter, Mariota looks to put up even better numbers in his second year, which he would do in his sophomore campaign, throwing for 34 touchdowns to 4 interceptions with 3,665 yards total while leading Oregon to an 11-2 record. Despite the success of his first 2 seasons, the biggest knock against Mariota and the Ducks was they could never win the big game against their conference rivals, always being 1 game away from the national championship before suffering a heartbreaking defeat to eliminate them from contention. Going into his junior year, Mariota and the Ducks were determined to switch the narrative. Heading into Week 9 of the 2014 season, the Ducks had an 8-1 record after having a lone hiccup on a Friday night game against Arizona. Now, the biggest game of the year so far, facing a bitter rival in the Stanford Cardinal, who had Oregon's number the past 2 seasons. Stanford had pounded Oregon into the ground the previous 2 years, running the ball at will, chewing clock, and making life hell for Mariota while eliminating Oregon from national championship contention in the process. Mariota was dialed in, and him and the Ducks finally matched the Cardinals' physicality in a dominant performance. The Ducks came out on top 45-16, and it looked like Mariota had finally found a way to silence critics. Other than a temporary scare in Utah, Oregon had no trouble getting to the Pac-12 championship, beating every team handily, outscoring their opponents 193-69 along the way. In Week 5, Oregon lost a frustrating game to Arizona, and in the Pac-12 championship game, they looked to avenge their prior defeat. They came out and utterly destroyed the University of Arizona by a score of 51-13, and with that victory, sealed a spot in the very first college football playoff in NCAA history at the Rose Bowl. The very first college football semifinal at the Rose Bowl in NCAA history would be a game between the defending national champions, the Florida State Seminoles, and the Oregon Ducks. The top 2 quarterback prospects heading into the 2015 draft, Jameis Winston and Mariota himself, were on the big stage on New Year's Day. 2 weeks prior to this colossal game, Marcus Mariota became the first Oregon Duck and Hawaii-born athlete to win the Heisman Trophy.
The winner of the 2014 Heisman Memorial Trophy is Marcus Mariota of the University of Oregon.
Winning the Heisman that year was also a big deal, just the attention that brought to the university.
The biggest game of Mariota's career was about to start.
They'll bring it out. This is Allen. The sprinter, still loose. Can't spin free, dropped at the 20. And that's where the Heisman Trophy winner, the proud Hawaiian, will begin.
After feeling each other out in the first half, the score was 18-13 for Oregon. But then, when the third quarter started, Oregon pulled away, off of many Florida State mistakes. The game ended with Oregon winning 59-20. This was Mariota's biggest win of his career.
Previous year with Winston, and for him to go to Pasadena and win that game, the fact that they could win that game, I think, was very much a signature moment, right?
With that win, Oregon is now in the national championship, facing a red-hot Urban Meyer-led Ohio State Buckeyes. Come game time, Oregon is ready to go, but Ohio State played a way more physical game on both sides of the ball, and while Mariota did his best to lead them to a win, ultimately Ohio State came out on top 42-20. 2 days out of his most emotional defeat, Mariota officially declared for the 2015 NFL Draft and began his preparations to transition into the NFL. It will be Jameis Winston and Marcus Mariota battling to be the number 1 pick. Next time on The Fall Off. Front offices debate on Winston or Mariota.
We're wowed by Jameis's arm talent, right? And I thought Mariota had more than enough of that, but I think that's where Jameis might have separated himself a little bit, right? Like Mariota was probably the better athlete.
And after a long draft process, finally, a decision is made.
With the first pick in the 2015 NFL Draft, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select.
This has been the Fall Off Podcast. I'm Nicholas Hauka, and for Josh Udon, thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.
Everything is changing to digital. Everything is online. People aren't just waiting for the 6 o'clock news anymore. People want their news right now. They want to be able to go onto their smartphone, onto the internet, and see the news that they want to see.
Vancouver is growing at, a really rapid rate, the Lower Mainland even, and with the tools that we're given here, we're able to cover all of that.
Welcome to BCIT Magazine. I'm Radhika Sikakane.
In the program, they really leave it up to you. I mean, the help is there when you need it, figuring out how to use the programs like Premiere, Audition, and figuring out how to use the cameras. But it's up to you to sort of experiment and figure out what you can do when you go out in the field.
They brought candles and flowers to remember the student who lost her life yesterday.
Theresa May says the international community condemns Moscow.
They really make sure that you know the basics and you are able to put out a quality product.
I'm Brady Tretnero.
And I'm Radhika Sikakane. Thank you for tuning in to BCIT Magazine.